It really makes me mad when I talk to students a week before their LSAT and they still don't know the difference between necessary assumption and sufficient assumption questions in logical reasoning. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. These are some of the smartest students that you will ever meet. They've got top GPAs, great work ethic, but they still get this wrong because nobody ever sat them down and said to them, hey, those two words, necessary and sufficient, control the entire LSAT. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. In today's free LSAT class, we're talking about one of the most misunderstood distinctions in logical reasoning, the difference between necessary assumption and sufficient assumption questions. So today, I'm going to break it all down for you step by step. Then we're going to jump into some live drills together so you can test this out for yourself. Now, here is the simple one-sentence summary that can save you hours of frustration. Then we'll zoom out and look at it more big picture. Necessary assumptions are things the argument must have in order to work. In contrast, sufficient assumptions are things that, if true, make the argument guaranteed. So necessary must be true. Sufficient makes it true. That is it. That is the core difference. Necessary keeps the argument alive, and sufficient locks it down airtight. Now, most students mix up these two question types because both of them use the word assume. And our brains will go, oh, same word, same skill. But they are actually looking for completely different things. Necessary assumptions are like checking for oxygen. What must be present for life? Sufficient assumptions are more like building an airtight spacesuit. They seal everything in. And so you tell the difference between the question types based on the keyword or phrase in the question stem. Necessary assumption question stems will contain words or phrases like depends upon, requires, assumes, or presupposes. In contrast, sufficient assumption question stems contain words and phrases like if assumed, follows logically if assumed, properly inferred if assumed. And so here's your shortcut. If the question says depends on, they're asking for what the argument needs. If they say follows logically if, it's asking what would make it guaranteed. So imagine that you wanted to buy a $1 item. Having at least a penny is necessary because you can't buy a $1 item without possessing at least the value of a penny. In contrast, having $1 million is sufficient. It's way more than you would need, but it would get the job done. And then in the middle ground, having exactly $1 is both necessary and sufficient. So again, necessary is minimal and it's required. Sufficient is more than enough potentially. So every time that you face an assumption, a so-called assumption question, I want you to picture that dollar. Do you just need a penny to make it possible? Or are you looking for up to $1 million to make it guaranteed? Here's another way to think about it. Necessary is the floor. If you remove it, everything collapses. In contrast, sufficient is the ceiling. If you add it in, the whole structure is sealed. So here's your process for necessary assumption questions specifically. First, we confirm the stem to determine the question type. You want words and phrases like depends on, requires, and assumes. Then you find the core. What's the conclusion? And what's the evidence that supports it? Then you find the gap. What must be true for the conclusion to work? Then we use the negation test. You negate each answer and you see if the argument collapses. If it does, that answer was necessary. So, quick example here. Daily caffeine improves alertness, therefore it improves all job performance. Let's suppose we had a proposed necessary assumption. Improving alertness can improve some aspects of job performance. If we negate it and say improving alertness cannot improve any aspects of job performance, boom, the argument falls apart. And notice that proposed necessary assumption is moderate. And for this question type, we like moderate. For necessary assumptions, boring is beautiful. That's what we're looking for. We like words like some, can, likely, or at least one. Now, in contrast, sufficient assumption questions are the opposite. For these, we're not looking for something mild, we're looking for something powerful, a statement that guarantees the conclusion. Think of this as the bridge test. If you add this answer to the argument, the conclusion becomes logically airtight. No gaps, no wiggle room, no maybes. For example, all scholarship finalists have strong LSAT scores. Maya is a finalist, therefore, Maya will get into law school. What would guarantee that conclusion? If we learned as new information that all scholarship finalists are admitted to law school. That one line makes the argument unbreakable. And strong language is not only okay here, it's often required to guarantee the argument. So let's pause on that distinction because I think it's the key to unlocking this whole difference here. Necessary is more mild, sufficient is more bold. If a necessary assumption answer sounds too obvious, too easy, we already knew that, that's usually a good sign. In contrast, if a sufficient answer sounds too extreme, that's also usually a good sign. Your emotional reaction, your biases, your predispositions are often the opposite of what's correct. That's why the LSAT is so hard for so many people. It's about training you away from your innate predispositions, your instincts, your biases. You've got to unlearn your typical way of thinking. And the LSAT makers know that you love strong language. That's why they often put strong, sufficient answers before the necessary assumption in the choices. For example, there's this famous rattlesnake folktale question. You can Google it and you'll find it. In that question, one of the earlier answers is a powerful, sufficient assumption, and it's wrong. The right answer is a lot more moderate, appears later in the choices, but that is what is truly necessary. So I want you to, as you're going through these, slow down, don't go for the strongest answer, read the question stem, identify the task to perform, the job to be done, then you will evaluate them accordingly. Now, the four most common mistakes I see: mixing up the tool for the given job. For example, students will oftentimes incorrectly use the negation test on a sufficient assumption question or use the bridge test on a necessary assumption question. Negation is for necessary, bridge is for sufficient. Another big mistake is ignoring the question stem, jumping straight into the stimulus without labeling the task or the job to be done. Third big mistake, leading with emotions, picking an answer that feels strong instead of testing it out logically. And finally, not reviewing the patterns. If you miss one, if you get one wrong, I want you to write down why you got it wrong. And that last piece, the review, is where the growth happens. We call this the Socratic review method, asking why until you can pinpoint the exact reasoning error. That's what our coaches drill into every single one of our students who hit a plateau. And high scorers just do three simple things: the process, the step by step. They label the question type before reading the argument. They slow down enough to test the logic, and they review every single mistake deliberately. That is it. And when you start doing that, assumption questions stop feeling random. They start feeling predictable. They feel easy, almost mechanical. Like they'll say to themselves, oh, the question stem says depends on? Cool. Now I know what tool to use. And you start feeling in control again. So again, to quickly recap before we get into the drills: necessary keeps the argument alive, it is required, but sufficient locks it in tight and guarantees it. So that's it. That's my little talk. Theory time's over. Now we're going to put this into practice with live drills. I'll put a question stem on the screen. I'll give you a few seconds to think, and then you're going to type your answer in the chat. If you're not sure, just put a question mark, but please commit to something, and we'll go through them one by one. I'll walk you through exactly how to tell necessary versus sufficient in real time. So I'm going to read a question stem, and you're going to tell me, is it necessary or is it sufficient? So ready? Let's dive in. First one, I'm going to scroll back here because we got to the wrong slide here. 1 second. Okay, so first, which one of the following is an assumption on which the argument depends? Is it necessary assumption or is it sufficient assumption? Drop your answer in the chat. N for necessary, S for sufficient. If you're not sure, just put a question mark, but please commit to something. We are identifying the question type. I'll give folks a minute and then I'll start reading out some answers. Until the room says thank you for doing these, I just found out today. Awesome. Welcome. Nice to have you with us. We're doing these every single day, by the way, at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific, every weekday, Monday through Friday. Please come back and tell your friends. All right. So Jamie says necessary. L. Jackson says necessary. Gwyn says necessary. Valentina says necessary. Arden says necessary. Awesome. Jada says necessary. Brianne says necessary. Ardena says necessary. Lulu Lala says necessary. YouTube video says necessary. All right, so you are all correct. Well done. You all nailed it. That one is in fact necessary. The word depends is our necessary indicator. Next one, number 2. The conclusion follows logically if which one of the following is assumed. So put N for necessary, S for sufficient. If you're not sure, just put a question mark. So when you have your answer, please drop it in the chat. N for necessary, S for sufficient. We're looking for the key word or phrase in the question stem, synonymous with either necessity or sufficiency. So we have a flood here of S's. Lulu Lala says sufficient. Jamie says sufficient. L. Jackson sufficient. Arden's sufficient. Brianne sufficient. Gwyn sufficient. Valentina sufficient. Awesome. Fantastic. Y'all are nailing these. Great. On to the next. Number 3. The argument's reasoning requires the assumption that ellipses. So what is the assumption that is required in order for this argument to work? Valentina says necessary. Jamie says necessary. Lulu Lala says necessary. Brianne says necessary. Arden says necessary. Gwyn says necessary. Sweet. Awesome. Y'all are nailing these once again. Very good. All right, so let's go on to the next, number 4. Which one of the following, if assumed, allows the conclusion to be properly drawn? So properly drawn if assumed. What does it mean to properly draw an argument? Which one of the following, if assumed? So we have some folks answering here. I'll give a hint. The phrase if assumed, if is synonymous with sufficiency, just like sufficient conditions. Lulula says sufficient, Jamie says sufficient, Valentina sufficient, Brianne sufficient, Arden's sufficient. Awesome, we'll do one more of these, just one more, then we'll get on to tougher stuff. Number 5, the argument presupposes which one of the following? So what does it mean to presuppose something? Presupposing is assuming, right? But is it a necessary assumption or is it a sufficient assumption? When you have your answer, just drop N for necessary in the chat or S for sufficient in the chat. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark. A little bit tougher. Folks are pausing here. All right, we have Valentina putting S, but with a question mark. So not entirely sure. Brianne's got a question mark. L. Jackson says N with a question mark. Wynn's got a straight up question mark. Sen Artista, welcome, saying necessary. YouTube videos saying necessary. So it is in fact necessary. If they are presupposing something, they are assuming something. Now that's seemingly unclear. Are they necessarily assuming it or is it more of a sufficient assumption? But the thing is that if they are assuming it, that is being done and they are still drawing that conclusion. They are assuming the conclusion follows based on their presupposition. And so for that reason, it is a necessary assumption indicator. A presupposition is an assumption underlying the argument. It is already contained within the argument, meaning a person who believes that argument is logically committed to believing in all underlying necessary assumptions. So for number 5 here, the answer is N for necessary. Now we've done 5 of these so far. Out of the 5 that we've done, how many did you get right out of 5? Did you get all 5 out of 5 correct? Did you get 0 out of 5? Did you get 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5? If you've been keeping track of your answers so far, just please drop in the chat how you did so far out of these first 5. They will get tougher, but we're starting here. Brienne says 4 out of 5. Awesome, well done. That's 80% accuracy, puts you around a 160 or so. Ardens says 4 out of 5 also. Awesome. Gwyn says 4 out of 5. Fantastic. Valentina says 5 out of 5. Awesome. Jamie says 4 out of 5. Awesome. Fantastic. Well done. San Artista says 5 out of 5. Yeah, fantastic. Nailed these. Fantastic. So the reason I start here is because we've got to be able to identify the question type in order to be able to solve the question, right? And by the way, if you weren't getting perfect 5 out of 5, or you're not even sure how you did, or you want some support, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally, unpluggedprep.com/start. I want to help out as many folks as I can beyond what I can do with these free classes here on YouTube. So if you want to go a bit deeper down the LSAT rabbit hole, you want some help, some guidance, some personalized support on your journey to achieving your goal score whenever you're taking it, January, February, April, June, beyond, feel free to book a free call with me. Link is below the video on YouTube, also pinned here in the chat. Now, I had some more of these drills lined up to do, but I think you all are doing too well on these, so I'm going to get into some harder stuff. So let's go on to a real drill here, full-on question. This is a necessary assumption question. I'm not going to hide that. The argument's reasoning depends on which one of the following assumptions. So depends on means necessary. So I'm going to read the question. I'll give you all at least a couple minutes to take a look at it. This is question number 1. We're doing necessary assumptions to start. Researchers found that students who slept at least 7 hours the night before an exam scored higher than those who slept fewer than 5 hours. Therefore, sleeping longer improves exam performance. Necessary assumption. Give you all some time. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just put down a question mark. That's okay too. When you have your answer, just drop it in the chat so I know that you're done. And by the way, the first step to solving these is to ID the conclusion. So you look at what's the conclusion, what's the evidence, and then what's the gap. And then what would need to be the case in order for the argument to work given the conclusion. So a quick hint here, the word therefore is a conclusion indicator, telling us the final sentence of the argument is our conclusion. What comes before it is the evidence, but what is the leap that they are making? What needs to be the case for the argument to work. If it were not the case, the conclusion falls apart. So we've got suddenly a flood of answers coming in here. Boris, welcome, by the way. Boris says D. L. Jackson says D. Gwyn says D. Jamie says D. San Artista says D. Brienne says D. YouTube video says D. San Artista says D. Awesome, fantastic, folks. You all nailed it. The answer is, in fact, D. It's necessary. If the prep differed, then higher scores could be due to preparation, not sleep. So if we negate D, that causal conclusion collapses. Valentina also says D. Well done. Awesome, y'all. You nailed it. Let's go on to the next. Number 2, a company claims that using its new running shoes will make runners faster. In a recent test, runners wearing the company's shoes recorded faster times than those wearing older models. Therefore, the new shoes cause faster running speeds. The argument's reasoning requires the assumption that. So again, requires, we're still doing necessary assumption here. Same question type as the previous. Take a moment, give it a shot. When you're ready, drop your answer in the chat. Again, we want to ID the conclusion. We have the word therefore in the final sentence indicating conclusion. The new shoes cause faster running speeds based on this recent test that those who wore their shoes recorded faster times. So when you're ready, please drop your answer in the chat. I'll give folks another minute. I see a few folks coming in here. Awesome, folks. Give you another minute to answer. When you're ready, just drop it in the chat. All right, we have some folks coming in here. Valentina says D. Jamie says D. Brienne says C. Sorry, Valentina, folks are saying C. Jada says C. Gwyn says C. So we have a flood of C's coming in here. Awesome. Well done, folks. So the answer is, in fact, C. The two groups of runners were similar in ability before the testing began. Because if the baseline ability was different, then the faster times might be due to that innate ability, not the shoes themselves. And so if we negate that and say they were not similar, then it's not a comparison with any valid basis. By the way, YouTube video saying C, Sonoratista saying C as well. Awesome, everybody got it right. Number 3, dogs who receive daily praise obey commands more consistently than those who receive treats only once per week. Therefore, daily praise is more effective than weekly treats at improving obedience. The argument assumes which one of the following. So again, necessary assumption question. We once again have the word therefore indicating conclusion. Maybe this one's a little bit tougher. Folks are taking a little bit longer, but I do see some answers coming in here. So I'm seeing Brienne saying B with a question mark, Valentina saying B, L. Jackson saying C, Jada saying B. Gwen's got a question mark for this one, not sure. Totally fine. So maybe this one's a little bit tougher. Jamie saying C. All right, so the answer here is in fact B as in Bravo. The dogs who received daily praise and those who received weekly treats were similar in temperament. They need to be similar because if their temperaments were different, then the differences in their levels of obedience could be due to their temperament, not the method of the training or the praise. And so for that reason, negating B and saying they were not similar in temperament would break the argument apart and break apart that comparison. So the answer was in fact B. I see YouTube videos with saying D, question mark, LOL. Not totally sure. All dogs respond equally well to any kind of positive feedback. I want you to be careful here. I think it's worth discussing D for a second because it's a bit broad, right? It's making a claim regarding all dogs, saying all dogs respond equally well to any kind of positive feedback. Does that need to be the case in order for the argument to work? That every single dog in the world, regardless of breed, regardless of age, they all respond equally well with no difference at all? That would be kind of remarkable. I mean, that would be saying that like a Rottweiler and a Chihuahua respond equally well to feedback. There's probably some difference between dog breeds and how they respond. Different dog breeds have different personalities, right? Additionally, a really old dog is going to respond differently than a really young dog. I mean, I have dogs. I've had dogs for years. I love dogs. And I can tell you that a puppy is going to respond very differently than an older dog who sleeps all day, right? Puppies are a little bit more hyper, a little bit more responsive to treats or toys. Older dogs just don't care. They're going to respond differently. So it would be remarkable if this argument required that that every single dog in the world responds equally well. So again, we want to gravitate towards more moderate language in necessary assumption questions than more extreme language, because a more moderate claim is more likely to have been required by the argument than a more broad claim would be, right? So D is saying all dogs, pretty broad, pretty extreme. In contrast, choice B is focused specifically on the dogs in this argument and the dogs in this, we'll call it a study, and just saying they were similar in temperament. Not that they were exactly the same, but that they were similar. Anyway, next one, number 4. A nutritionist claims that people who take supplement Z have stronger immune systems than those who don't. Therefore, taking supplement Z strengthens the immune system. The argument's reasoning depends on which one of the following assumptions. So again, depends on, we're talking necessary assumption here. So when you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, Just put down a question mark, but please commit to something since you will have to commit on test day. Better to get into the habit now. All right, so we have a few folks answering here, dropping into the chat. Let's see. L. Jackson is saying B. M is saying D. Welcome, M. Jamie says B. Brienne says D. Valentina says B. Jada says D. So we have a mix of answers here, a mix of B's and D's. Then we have San Artista saying A. Okay, so the question here is what is required for this argument to work? And by the way, one last answer here coming in, Gwyn saying B. So we want what is required for this particular argument, and if we negate it, the argument falls apart. So B and D are both tempting. The difference here is that we're focused specifically on this supplement Z specifically. And so choice D as in delta hits on supplement Z specifically, saying people who take supplement Z are not generally healthier than those who do not. It's necessary because if the people who take Z were already healthier, then the observed difference might not be due to Z. So if we negate choice D, the causation here collapses. B as in Bravo is talking about supplements in general, not supplement Z specifically. So again, if we negate D, people who take Z are healthier than those who do not, meaning they're healthier to begin with, then it could be that Z has no impact. Cool. And I see Valentina and Boris both changing their answers to D, going for D. Awesome. Well done, folks. Let's go on to the next. Number 5. City officials claim that banning late-night construction will reduce residents' stress. A critic responds that the officials' claim is flawed because they provided no evidence that construction noise actually causes stress. Which one of the following does the critic's reasoning require? When you're ready, just drop your answer in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just put a question mark. But again, please commit to something since you'll have to commit on test day. Better to get into the habit now. All right, so we have Boris saying C, Brienne saying C, Vodrick, welcome. Vodrick saying C as well. Wynn saying C, Jada saying C, Valentina saying C, Jamie saying C. So yeah, y'all are nailing it. Exactly right. C says a claim that banning late night construction will reduce stress must be supported by evidence that construction noise causes stress. So that is directly expressing the assumption of the argument. I mean, the critic here is saying officials didn't give evidence for the noise and stress link, therefore their claim is flawed. And that only makes sense if the critic believes that this evidence is required for the claim to be supported. And so if we negate C and we say there's no evidence needed at all, then their attack collapses because the absence of evidence wouldn't be a problem anymore. So that's why this negation test works here. And I see San Artista coming in saying C. Awesome, folks. You all nailed it. Next one. Now we're getting into sufficient assumption. Note the question stem difference here. Which one of the following, if assumed, allows the conclusion to be properly drawn? Argument goes, anyone who regularly drinks strong coffee has above average energy. Taylor has above average energy, therefore Taylor regularly drinks strong coffee. Take a moment, give this one a shot. Remember, different question type this time. We're doing Sufficient assumption here, what new information, if true, guarantees the conclusion, leaving no ambiguity at all. Doesn't matter how strong it is, as long as it gets the job done. So we have a couple answers coming in here. I see M saying B, Brianne saying B, L. Jackson saying B. Gwyn saying B. Roderick saying B. Jamie saying A. Rebel. Okay, cool. Let's see what happens. Boris saying A also. San Artista saying B. Okay, so note that both A and B, and then Valentine is saying D. All right, so A says most people, B says only people, then D says Taylor drinks coffee more often than the average person. No one chose C, but I'll talk about C also. C says some coffee drinkers. And so I said earlier how we have, we want to gravitate towards more moderate language and necessary assumption questions. And then in insufficient assumption, more extreme language is okay, right? Doesn't matter how strong it is as long as it gets the job done. So we should not necessarily gravitate towards more moderate language for a sufficient assumption question. Our goal here is simply to provide new information that, if true, guarantees the argument 100%, leaving no ambiguity at all. Now, this argument had evidence saying anyone who regularly drinks strong coffee has above average energy. So coffee, arrow, energy would be a simple way to sum it up. Then we have Taylor specifically with above average energy. Therefore, Taylor regularly drinks strong coffee. So the evidence was saying coffee, arrow, energy. Then the conclusion is taking having energy to guarantee coffee. So it's like there is a reversal here, which is invalid, right? We shouldn't be doing reversals. Contrapositives are okay, where you flip and negate to get a logically equivalent statement, but we cannot infer a reversal based on an original. So the new information that we ideally want to see here would allow the reversal to logically follow. It would guarantee the reversal of the logic. And so choice B, as in Bravo, provides that by saying energy, arrow, coffee. If only those who drink strong coffee have above average energy, that means if you have the energy, then you must have drank strong coffee. So in choice B, the word only introduces the necessary condition, coffee. Then the other part of the statement, the word energy, is the sufficient condition before the arrow. So B is essentially saying energy requires coffee. Just like the Taylor example in the stimulus said energy, therefore coffee. So B, as in Bravo, is the new information that guarantees the energy, arrow, coffee conditional statement. You could diagram this as E, arrow, C if you wanted to. Not saying diagramming is the way to go here, but if you wanted to symbolize it in a diagram, if that helps your thinking for this kind of question, at least when you're learning in the early stages, totally fine to do it. Sufficient assumptions are one of the few question types where I would say diagramming is sometimes okay to do. So that's how I would think through this question. Again, choice B is the answer because it tells us energy, arrow, coffee, which matches the Taylor example in the argument. Next one, number 2. All applicants who score above 170 on the LSAT receive a full scholarship. Jordan received a full scholarship, therefore Jordan scored above 170. The conclusion follows logically if which one of the following is assumed. Again, sufficient assumption. And notice here that we are also dealing with conditional statements once again, just like in the previous example. So take a moment, give this one a shot. When you're ready, drop your answer in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just put a question mark. All right, we got a flood of answers coming in here. Jamie's saying A, Valentina's saying A, Jada's saying A, M saying A, Gwen saying A, Brienne saying A, Vodrick saying A. Awesome. So you all learned the lesson from the previous question. Exactly right. Notice the word only once again. Only those who score above 170 receive full scholarships. So scholarship arrow 170 plus, which matches exactly the Jordan example in the argument. Perfect. Y'all nailed it. Well done. Next one, number 3. Most members of Fit Life Gym who attend 3 or more classes per week achieve their fitness goals. Jordan attends 3 classes per week at Fit Life Gym. Therefore, Jordan has achieved their fitness goals. Which one of the following, if assumed, makes the conclusion follow logically? So again, sufficient assumption question. Valentina asks, can we say sufficient assumption uses extreme language? It's okay if sufficient assumption uses extreme language. For necessary assumption, we want to gravitate towards more moderate language, all else being equal. But for sufficient assumption, doesn't matter how extreme the language is as long as it gets the job done. And by the way, San Artista said for the previous one, A, lock it. Awesome, fantastic. Yeah, exactly. You're getting there. You're doing it right. Okay, so this one, Fit Life Gym, sufficient assumption, extreme language, okay. But our goal, more specifically, is to just simply guarantee the logic of the argument, guarantee the conclusion given the evidence about Jordan achieving their fitness goals. So we have a flood of answers here. Jamie saying A, Valentina saying A, M saying A, San Artista saying A, Jada saying A. Exactly right, folks. It is in fact A. Notice how A is saying everyone who attends at least 3 classes per week. So this is going beyond the most in the stimulus to all or everyone in the choice, which then guarantees that Jordan will achieve their goals specifically. So A is stronger than we needed, right? Because the stimulus was just saying most. A is saying everyone, which goes beyond what the stimulus claimed. It's to be viewed as new information, but it certainly guarantees that this will occur for Jordan specifically, because otherwise, maybe Jordan would have been the exception to the rule. Maybe Jordan would have fallen into the minority of those who don't achieve their goals. A prevents that from happening by saying that literally every single person who attends will achieve their goals. So well done, folks. San Artista says, yeah, getting there, big relief. Yeah, sweet. I mean, you're on the track. Just keep following these drills, keep putting in the work, keep studying. And by the way, folks, when are you all taking the test? I know we got a couple of test dates coming up, November in just 1 week. Is anybody here taking it in just under a week or so? We've then got January about 2 months away, February about 3 months away. I've been talking to some folks lately who are even going for April, which I think is great. I had someone this morning who's going for August, which is like 10 months away. Okay, so I see here, Christine is going for November in a week. Good luck. Brienne going for January. Valentina going for January. I'm going for November. Vodrick going for January. Arden's going for February. Jada going for February. Anybody not sure when they're taking it? I see San Artista is going for January. Sweet. Okay, so we got some time here for most of you at least. San Artista is saying January 8th. Cool. Gwen says, I haven't scheduled yet, just started. Well, I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Plenty of time to improve. Jamie says November in just a week or so. Good luck, folks. And so whenever you're taking it, whether it's November in a week, if you're taking it in 2 months in January, I invite every single one of you to book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally, unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below this video in the description. Link pinned in the chat as well. I want to meet with every single one of you, help you craft your study plans, going beyond what I can do in this context here in a group setting. Brienne saying I'm still over a year out from graduating undergrad, and so that's fine. You can take the LSAT and your score is good for 5 years, so no rush. But again, all of you, I'll be happy to help you out, talk through your time frame, your goals, and help you craft a plan to get to your goal by the time you're taking the test. Anyway, on to the next. So please book that free lesson with me, link below the video. Next example, question number 4. All LSAT students who consistently use the Socratic review method improve their scores. Jordan improved her LSAT score. Therefore, Jordan consistently used the Socratic review method? Which one of the following, if assumed, allows the conclusion to be properly drawn? So again, sufficient assumption. What new information, when added to this argument, would guarantee the conclusion, leaving no ambiguity at all? When you're ready, drop your answer in the chat. And if you're not sure, put down a question mark. All right, we have a couple answers coming in. Brian saying B, M saying B, Gwyn saying B, Valentina saying B, Jamie saying B, Mr. Mayor Welcome saying B, Vodrick saying B. So a flood of Bs, Christina saying B also. Awesome, Christina, great. Jada saying B. Y'all are nailing it exactly right. So B, only LSAT students who consistently use the Socratic review method improve their scores. So again, only introduces necessary condition. Only those who use the Socratic method improve their scores. And so if you improve your score, then you used the Socratic review method. Sun Artista saying B, locking it in. Sweet, fantastic, nailed it. And so you'll notice that a lot of these drills, I'm using the same format again and again and again. And there's a reason for that. It's because the LSAT repeats itself. And these are just drills. These are not official questions. We can't display them here for copyright reasons. But the idea being that the LSAT makers will reuse the same logical formats again and again with different disguises, different window dressing, different surface level topics. But what we want you to do here is to see the underlying logic of the question, regardless of the topic. Because when you can see it in different disguises, the topic no longer matters. You can see the underlying structure or the skeleton of the argument. Then if there's a topic you don't like, that you don't connect with, like for some people, it'll be hard natural science, or it'll be philosophy, morality, aestheticism, really abstract, difficult topics on philosophy, let's say. But if you can spot the underlying core trigger words, like the word only, for example, then you can still get it right, even if you don't like the topic. So that's the goal here. All right, last one, number 5. Every animal in the North Reserve is tagged with a tracking chip. Therefore, if an animal is tagged with a tracking chip, it lives in the North Reserve. Which one of the following, if assumed, allows the conclusion to be properly drawn? Take a moment, give it a shot. When you're ready, drop your answer in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just put down a question mark, but commit to something. I'll give you all a minute. All right, we got a flood of answers coming in here. Awesome. Valentina saying A, Christina saying A, Jamie saying A, Gwyn saying A, M saying A, Brianne saying A. Awesome, folks. Well done. So the answer is, in fact, A. Again, choice A, only animals in the North Reserve are tagged with tracking chips. So what A is doing here is it is, again, introducing the necessary condition with the word only. So if they are tagged, then they're in the North Reserve. It gives you that needed by conditional because we needed to reverse the logic given what was missing from the claim in the argument. So they were saying that if it was in the North, it was tagged. But the conclusion saying if it was tagged, it's in the North. They reversed it, which was invalid, not permitted to do. And so A fills in that gap by providing the needed logic, new information, to reverse the conditional statement. So well done, folks. And by the way, welcome, Ashley, choosing A as well. Got it right, first one. Okay, so folks, out of curiosity, we did 5 necessary assumption drills and 5 sufficient assumption drills. Out of those 10 drills, 5 necessary, 5 sufficient, how many did you get right out of those 10? If you were keeping track, if you were noting it in your notes app or in a physical notebook, how many did you get right out of those 10? Was it 5 out of 10? Was it 8 out of 10? Saw a lot of folks getting a lot of questions right. Once again, I'm feeling like I got to make these questions harder for you all because you're getting too many correct on average. So do me a favor, drop for me in the chat how many you got right out of the 10 that we did here. Valentina is saying 9 out of 10. Awesome. Jamie saying 8 out of 10. Also awesome. Great job, guys. Pretty high accuracy here. Gwyn saying 8 out of 10. Again, fantastic. For rough reference here, an 80% accuracy probably puts you around the 160 range or so. 9 out of 10 probably puts you around, I'll say maybe a 165 or so. So pretty solid. Brianne saying not counting the last one, 9 out of 10. Senator Artista saying 9 out of 10, also fantastic. That's pretty solid, pretty good. Y'all are on the right track here. I think that whenever you're taking it, even if you're taking it in a week, you're in shape to get a pretty solid score. If you want to get to a consistent 10 out of 10, if you're going for January, February, you got a bit more time. And again, I'm happy to help you walk through your plan of attack and craft a study plan, help you figure out your next steps for what your study plans should look like. Since we have some time here, I could talk about that a little bit if you'd like. And I'm just scanning back here in terms of when you all were taking the test. So let's see here. I saw that. Let's see. Christina and M are taking November. Jamie's taking November as well. All right, so you got some time, right? So if you're taking it in November in just 1 week, I'm going to recommend focusing on full exams and drilling questions by type. That is your next step. So full exams and then drill your weak areas, review in depth. So taking a full exam, that means you take it under realistic test day conditions, full sitting, 2 sections back to back, 10-minute break, 2 more sections, and that's the test. You're doing strict timing, 35-minute sections. You're not pausing the clock to go to the bathroom or get a snack or check your phone or talk to your roommate or your family or whoever. You're just sitting there doing your full practice test under strict timed conditions. When people say to me their score dropped from the practice to the actual, a lot of the time it's due to not adopting strict timed conditions. And so your scores are inflated on the practice because you were being a bit too liberal with the timing. So I encourage you, for the last 1 or 2 practice tests you take, you strictly time it under real world test day conditions. That way you don't experience the test day score drop. You get familiar with the software for test day. You take your practice tests using LSAC's Law Hub platform, similar to the software you'll take with Prometric on test day itself. You're not taking the practice tests in the books or some third-party platform. I have a video on the YouTube channel. I'll see if I can quickly pull up the link for you all, specifically about last-minute test day advice. This is all about what to do in the final week or so before your exam. I'm dropping that in the chat. Let me know if that comes through for you. But that is all my best last-minute test day tips, test day strategies. I see that Brianne's taking it in January, Valentina's taking January, Valdrick's taking January, San Artista's taking January as well. And so for those of you taking January as well, I see Boris is taking January. For all of you, you've got about 2 months between now and your exam. So I'm going to recommend taking a step back before you dive into doing nothing but full-length exams. Make sure there aren't any lingering weak areas. If there's a certain question type, a certain method of reasoning, a certain section, you want to drill those on the side. Maybe review some foundational material on those question types. If you're taking a prep course, maybe you review those lessons. If you're in a coaching program, you talk through those question types with your coach. But there may be some lingering weak area that you should drill and focus on before you dive into the full exams. And if you're taking February, you've got a bit more time. I see here that, for example, Arden's is taking February, gives a bbit more time. That additional month, I see Jada is taking February as well. That extra time could do a lot for you to boost up your score. And so if you're feeling like you're not hitting your goals, if your PT score is not where you want to be, maybe you want to give it another month and push it back from January to February. Or if your practice test scores are not where you want them to be and you're scheduled a week from now, maybe you say to yourself, you know what? I want to give it another 2 months and postpone from November to January. And people will say to me, oh, Steve, but here's the thing. I want to apply early. And the thing is that, yes, applying earlier is better than applying later, all else being equal. But the thing is that all else is rarely equal, because giving yourself some extra time to give yourself a higher score is well worth pushing back your test date. In other words, it's better to apply a little bit later with a higher score than to apply earlier with a lower score. And so giving yourself that extra time could be the biggest way for you to improve your score. And apply with a stronger application as a result. I also saw a question here asking about accommodations. Is anyone comfortable if they applied for accommodations saying so? And so I'll share a comment on that in the meantime, which is that applying for accommodations, totally fine to do. LSAC has become a lot more liberal in granting extra time accommodations. They used to be pretty strict about this. It used to be that people would sue them for being wrongfully denied the granting of accommodations for extra time or extra breaks on grounds of having, say, ADHD or testing anxiety or migraines. If you can provide sufficient documentation from a qualified professional, like a doctor or a more specialized doctor, like a psychiatrist, LSAC has now gotten more liberal in granting those. And so all you've got to do is send in the documentation, send in a statement of need, and LSAC will likely give you what you ask for. Could be time and a half, could be double time. There's no reason to be ashamed of having gotten accommodations or worrying about having gotten accommodations. Law schools will never even know that you got the accommodations. It's not noted on your record in any way. And it might be what you need to be on a level playing field. So if you think you might qualify, explore it, seek it out. LSAC is pretty strict about the deadlines for applying for accommodations. And so make sure you send in everything that you need to by the deadline. And that might be, again, another reason to push back your test date if you were considering accommodations but didn't go for it. Of course, it's too late for November with the test being a week away. But if you are taking January, February, beyond, you've got the time to get the documentation in and hear back from them to know what you're going to get so that you can study accordingly. Now, like I said, folks, I'm going to keep doing these free daily classes for as long as I can. They'll be every weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. I'm open to ideas for what we cover in the coming days and weeks. And so if you have any requests for topics you want me to cover, different question types, different concepts, different methods of reasoning, maybe cover reading comp, a certain area there, happy to add that to the agenda. So just drop in the chat any ideas and I'm happy to consider them. I see San Artista asking about accommodations. Can we provide documents from a different country or only the USA? That's a really good question. I would ask LSAC. I'm not entirely sure about whether they consider documentation from other countries. I'm pretty sure they'd want it to be in English at the very least. They're not in a position to evaluate documents in other languages, and so I'm pretty sure they'd want it to be in English. But double check with them. You can always email them at lsacinfo@lsac.org. If you email them, do it far in advance of when you need to hear back because there can be a delay. But again, folks, I'm open to ideas, suggestions for topics that we cover. You can always drop your ideas in the chat here or drop them in the comments below the video after the fact for anyone watching later. Again, some ideas I've had in the past to cover for the future would be reading comprehension, strengthen questions, weaken questions, inference questions, going deeper on necessary assumption, going deeper on numbers versus percentages. Do any of those topics appeal to anybody? If so, just drop in the chat for your requests for what I could cover in the future. We'll have our next class Monday, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I'll see you all then. Have a great weekend in the meantime, folks, and wish you all the best. And again, if you want my help, you can book that free lesson with me, unpluggedprep.com/start, link below the video. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.